Welcome back to Global Supply Chain Week. My name's Kevin Hill, Executive Publisher here at FreightWaves, and we have a great talk coming up. We're going to talk about ethics and sustainability, a little bit about blockchain, I think, as well, as it pertains to the global supply chain. I'm joined here with Justin Goldston, who is a professor. He's also a TEDx speaker, executive board member, outside director, author, and studies sustainability and ethics, and that is his research. Welcome to the show today, Justin. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So I listed off a few things that you have on LinkedIn about what you do, but can you explain to our audience out here exactly what that means and what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so currently I'm a professor of project and supply chain management at Penn State University, where I blend supply chain management, emerging technologies, and sustainability in all of my research as well as in my teachings. Because of that, I work closely with the Sustainability Institute at Penn State, as well as the Institute for Computational and Data Sciences at the institution. And we are moving into an area where we're bringing professors from different disciplines. We're creating this interdisciplinary environment where we are moving away from practical application, and we are moving into practical application, I should say, and moving away from the theory, because it's my argument that we're creating some amazing research that gets lost within the peer-reviewed journal articles for these artificial intelligence applications to find it years from now when it's too late. So I think that we are creating actionable research, and that's one thing that I'm very passionate about.
So Justin, can you share some of the research topics that you're doing that don't fall within that AI-enabled search and find that you find in a lot of peer-reviewed research?
Yeah, so there's a lot of work we're doing in terms of sustainability, where we are bringing in a shared leadership model. Where we are doing research on the positive impacts of bringing millennials and Gen Zs into let them have a seat at the table, if you will, to harness creativity, to harness innovation, to have a positive impact on the bottom line for an organization. So that's one example. Another example from a technology perspective is we are actually implementing artificial intelligence for positive social change. So we can immediately take these algorithms that are created and implement them within the industry to make a positive impact on communities.
So when you say implementing AI for sustainability, can you dive down a little bit deeper into that?
So the big issue that we're having in terms of artificial intelligence is that these algorithms are developed by individuals. They're developed by humans. And that's one thing where we are providing a consensus-based approval process in the development of these algorithms, where whenever these algorithms are created, then they are going to be reviewed by a diverse community of individuals, and then once they approve those particular algorithms, then they are actually put into place and actually put into production.
So let's switch over to ethics and focus a little bit on ethics in the supply chain. Supply chains are complex, and that they stretch sometimes around the globe to multiple countries, and ethical dilemmas always pop up. What are your thoughts, and can you tell us a little bit about those ethical dilemmas and what supply chains face?
I know from a supply chain perspective, I always say that supply chains are complex for a reason in some aspects. We have modern slavery within our supply chains. We have child labor within our supply chains. And I think that we can leverage technology such as blockchain to increase the transparency throughout our supply chains. That's one thing that I'm working on with a number of leaders throughout different industries, where we can create supply chains, and we can start from the farm and start putting those transactions on the supply chain, and then that's transparent to all consumers around the world in a permissionless blockchain, if you will. So that could mean that we could have a platform, if you will, where you can have your particular garment. You can put that garment's, UPC code or lot number on the blockchain, and then you can track and trace that garment all the way from the source.
So let's, because I don't know a lot about blockchain, and I don't think a lot of our audience or experts in blockchain, like Patrick Duffy or president of BIDA, and we've been talking a little bit about blockchain throughout the conference. Let's take a concrete example, and that is the Xinjiang region of China, and the U.S. has recently banned all cotton coming out of there because of slave labor issues. But it's very hard to track down where cotton comes from, those raw materials. Can we go through like a case study of using blockchain and other technologies to be able to help trace where you're procuring raw materials, or where your vendors are procuring raw materials?
Mm-hmm. So if we were to use a garment that began out of China, if we have this retailer, if you will, if we have the Walmart, let's just say if we have Amazon, if Amazon would institute a policy to say all transactions that go into making this particular garment has to be put on the blockchain, then you have all business partners, all players that have skin in the game. So whenever you have this manufacturer that has to put their information on the blockchain, they have to go to their suppliers to say, okay, in order for us to continue business, because Amazon makes up this percentage of my business, you have to put your transactions on the blockchain. So it's that where we move upstream, up to the supply chain, all the way to the supplier, where each business partner has to collaborate, and they have to work with each other to ensure that all of those transactions are put on a blockchain. Now, we have seen some of that with the pandemic. We've seen this increased collaboration with the pandemic, but I always say that, why did it get to a pandemic for us to communicate and collaborate and to increase transparency throughout our supply chains? But given that we have seen the initial steps in that process, I think that this adoption and this transition will be a little bit easier.
Do you think that the pandemic, you mentioned it, why does it take a pandemic for us to do a number of things that the world has done over the last year? But I guess necessity is the mother of all invention. Do you see an acceleration in the adoption of, whether it be blockchain or AI or algorithms, that really are used and able to track and trace movement of not only the finished goods, but the raw materials and all through the production and distribution line?
I think that we've seen the acceleration in artificial intelligence, because we had the vaccine because of artificial intelligence. Because typically it would take years for us to get a vaccine. So we've already seen the acceleration of AI in that regard. But I think that we're a ways away from the adoption of blockchain, and I think that adoption is going to begin with one of the big players. It's going to begin with the Walmart. It's going to begin with a Target. It's going to begin with an Amazon to say, okay, now you all have to adopt this new technology, this new solution, in order to do business with us. So that's one thing. That's one thing that I see. But another thing I want to note is that whenever we say AI, I always refer to it as augmented intelligence. It's not going to take over jobs. It's only going to assist individuals in their day-to-day processes. So that's one thing I just want to stress in that yes, we're going to see an acceleration in AI, but it's going to make our jobs easier, and it's going to allow for individuals to focus on more value-added activities.
when we talk about adoption of supply chain, or not of supply chain, but adoption of blockchain, and one of the largest players will have to go out and be on the forefront. We kind of saw that during this past year with remote working, right? No one really wanted to be the first one out doing the test case, but out of necessity with the pandemic, everyone had to do it at once. I mean, you didn't really have a choice. And it turned out not to be so bad. Do you think that there's going to have to be another emergency or something that really rattles the world for blockchain to all of a sudden become a necessity? Maybe it is, something in the raw materials or some kind of, I don't want to say a disease, but something that really is a concern to a lot of people that spreads through the world, whether it's through physical products or a virus, to take that action to where everyone has to switch to blockchain and those protocols as a necessity.
I think that we're going to see this accelerated adoption due to the consumers. The consumers are going to want this increased transparency. So I think that's where you're going to see this acceleration of this tool. There are discussions that Walmart is already looking to standardize these applications. There are a number of consortiums within the industry that are trying to create global standards for blockchain, similar to how we've created global standards for EDI, for example. So there are steps in the right direction to standardize this process, and I think that although it may be a few years away, I think that it's going to be adopted.
So Justin, you mentioned alliances and associations and collaboration with setting up standards for blockchain. We're doing that. Our president here, or president of the Blockchain and Transportation Alliance, Patrick Duffy, certainly works on that day in and day out. You mentioned consumers as well, and maybe driven by consumer sentiment or takes. What are some of the top two or three changes in what consumers will want that might drive the acceptance of blockchain?
I believe the biggest thing is transparency, and another thing is the proof of sustainable practices. They want to know the source of their products. They want to ensure that those products are sourced sustainably. There is no slave labor, as we said before, within those processes. They want to ensure that there's no child labor within those processes. They want to ensure that what part of the world those particular items are sourced from. Or so, for example, they're not manufactured in a factory that also works with tree nuts, or a factory that to ensure that particular product is indeed organic. So you're going to need a lot of visibility in that regard, and it's going to come down to the consumers. And another thing is that millennials and Gen Zs, they perform a lot of research in terms of where their products come from. So they want to ensure that what's documented within those marketing materials on social media is indeed true. So you're going to see a lot of research and they're going to say, okay, prove it, and then that's going to come down to information on the blockchain.
So I guess it all really comes down to, at the end of the day, just like everything else in life, is ethics, right? It'll be driven by ethics. And let's close the interview and talk the last few minutes here about ethics and supply chains and some of those trends that you're seeing, and what those trends are going forward with bringing in more ethical practices to a global supply chain.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing. I mean, we've heard of the term greenwashing and social washing often, and I think that because of social media, you're going to have to act ethically If you're not acting ethically, then it's going to be on social media and it's going to go viral very quickly. So I think that just because due to technology, these organizations are going to have to walk the talk, if you will, from an ethical perspective.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think certainly the more transparency that's brought to the market, the more ethically driven life will be in supply chains as well. Thanks for joining us today, Justin. How does our audience reach out and learn more about your work, what you're doing at Penn State, view your TEDx talk? How do they get in contact with you?
Yes, if you go on TED.com and you type in Justin Goldston, you will see those TEDx talks. Also, if you go on LinkedIn, I upload a lot of content in the area of supply chain management, sustainability, and emerging technologies such as blockchain and artificial intelligence. And you can also reach me on via email at jlg566@psu.edu.
Thank you again, Dr. Justin Goldston. And everyone, stay tuned for our next fireside chat here at the Global Supply Chain Week.